Okay, so I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction about the world of women in farming. I don't really have that much knowledge. I've just got some stats and facts and figures, and hopefully these amazing women will give you more of an insight into what it's like being a woman in the agricultural industry. But overall, there's an increasing number of women entering the world of agriculture, whether that's through agricultural colleges or courses, or taking up previously male-dominated roles on the farm, or pioneering growing produce in urban spaces. And women now make up 1/3 of the agricultural workforce, which is an increase of 7% over the last decade. And of the current cohort of PhD students in agriculture-related studies, 60% are female. So it's pretty safe to say that women are beginning to lead the way in innovative farming techniques. And while these are really amazing figures in themselves, particularly for the wider liberation of women, it's also really important that women are educated, trained, and empowered to get into growing and farming. And a pretty stark fact from the UN states that if women farmers had the same resources as men, the number of hungry people could be reduced by 150 million people, and agricultural productivity boosted by between 20% and 30%. So aside from the general global liberation of women, there are several possible reasons why women are taking up more space in this still relatively heavily male-dominated world. Perhaps it's because of an increase in desires to crack through the centuries-old tradition and culture, or maybe because more women are entering the world of work where previously their role was in the house, or even because of a wider awareness of the climate and ecological crisis and how that's driven by and impacts our food system. And it's been quoted in quite a few studies that women are often the ones to be more concerned about the climate crisis than male than men. But what is it actually like being a woman in agriculture? So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Patsy now, who is going to talk a bit about where she's come from. And also we'll just say quickly, the range of speakers tonight spans across 3 generations. So it's a really amazing in-depth look at what it's like being a woman through for the last few decades. Patsy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Patsy Chapman from Longmeadow in Godmanston in Dorset. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share a bit of my story with you. It's been surprisingly stimulating and enjoyable reflecting on my 70 years, where I came from and where I find myself now. Having relatively recently retired from 32 years of commercial vegetable growing, I'm still celebrating having more time and energy. And of course, the last year of the pandemic enforced a kind of simplicity in my life. As we'd only just sold our horticultural equipment, there was no possibility for us to recultivate our acres and start back up again, which could have been a temptation. Thank goodness. I thought I would try to give you a picture in a nutshell of my journey, the world I grew up in, and the women role models along the way. I was born in New England in the USA on a dairy farm, the middle of 3 sisters, and spent my first 6 years there with happy memories of watching my father milk the cows. My mother, a trained pianist, toiled in the farmhouse, preparing meals for the workmen. She was much loved, but unhappy and unfulfilled. When my father's back could no longer take the strain of farm work, the family moved to Florida, and soon after my mother sadly died. It was the 50s and the time of segregation in the South. My little sister and I went to a white school. After several years, my sisters and I were returned to New England to live with my German grandmother. Little did I appreciate how formative those few years would be. She had immigrated from Eastern Germany in the early 30s with her 3 young sons. and in New York City, she found work cooking in the Rudolf Steiner School. Her sons were able to attend the school, and she was able to save her nickels and dimes to purchase some land, a small mountain, in fact, in the Berkshire Hills of Massachusetts. Eventually, she built herself a house with her bare hands out of field stones, with beautiful wooden features carved by my uncle. Sadly, the house burnt to the ground one winter when, with snow thick on the ground, the fire trucks were unable to reach it. To this day, I look at what the family named the ruins and wonder about her dreams. So I think my grandmother, the single parent, farmer, voracious reader, and BD gardener, in her combat boots and patched denim skirts, made me believe in and take for granted the creativity and indomitability of womankind. Years later, in 1969, after I had graduated from the Rudolf Steiner School in New York City, had attended a small liberal arts college and hitchhiked Greyhound bus and trained back and forth across the US and Canada, I found myself in Great Britain at Emerson College, where I met my now husband. It was at Emerson that I discovered my passion for growing, volunteering on Jimmy and Pauline Anderson's BD farm. Instead of returning to the US after our foundation year at Emerson, Hugh and I moved to the West Country and lived in the obligatory static caravan on a mixed farm in Somerset, where Hugh was employed. I found a job working for a lady farmer on a goat farm, making organic yogurt. On the move once again and pregnant, we moved in with old friends from Emerson who were in the process of converting a ruined chapel in the Preseli Hills of Wales. Our son was born in 1974, and this was a very milky chapter of our lives, with Hugh learning to milk cows and me learning to breastfeed. We got there eventually and moved to Penrach de Garthi farm, which with another couple we co-managed for the owner, Kathleen Arundel. This farm had already been organic for 25 years in 1974. Miss Arundel was an incredible, strong-minded woman, a contemporary of Eve Balfour, a spinster and an inspired gardener and farmer, who once again enforced my belief in myself as a woman, even though it was Hugh on the payroll. We still hadn't dipped our toes into a possible life in the USA. So with me about to pop with child number 2, we moved to Gould Farm in Massachusetts, a psychiatric rehabilitation community where Hugh worked on the farm, 500 acres, mostly woods, and I and the children joined in and contributed to the rich community life for 5 years. Great Britain beckoned us back, and in 1982, with 2 small children in tow, we returned to Somerset, where we were offered the possibility of growing a 6-acre field of vegetables in a share farm arrangement. We leapt at the opportunity with all of the faith and naivety of our relative youth. The children grew up, when they were not at school, in the field. This involved chickweed wigs and unpredictable tea times, but Hugh and I were always there for them. For me, it was all about nurturing, taking care, feeding, and protecting, and I never questioned the direction my life was taking. We managed and eventually owned a small flock of sheep too, which entailed visits to the Taunton market and annual sheep sales in the 80s. I felt like a gaudy bird in my red Peter Storm cagoule amongst the drab browns and greens of all the men in the marketplace. I can't really remember seeing women. The world of organic horticulture, on the other hand, seemed very different. Most of our friends and colleagues were part of working partnerships. But to be honest, mostly we women kept the home fires burning and looked after the children so the chaps could sit on committees like BOF and OGA. I felt no resentment. I knew how essential my role was to our business, and the very nature of my work as a grower made me feel empowered. In 1987, we moved our business from Somerset to Dorset. We had the opportunity to buy some land. This included moving our tractor, all of our implements, our sheep, our customers, as part of the Somerset organic producers, and even cabbages to Longmeadow, where we built ourselves a house and carried on the good work for the next 30 years. Because we were a small business, we could adapt and evolve in the ever-changing world of organic horticulture. This involved shutting down the co-op, which had become an expensive luxury, developing our farm gate sales, and starting up one of the first veg box schemes. A consequence of starting the veg box scheme was the need for a more diverse range of vegetables than our previous rather limited range for the wholesale market. Although in some ways this made our lives much more complicated, it also felt like a wholesome relief with more varied and dynamic gardening. Our children were growing and ready to fledge. It was the 90s and all was well as long as our backs held up. Longmeadow was starting to feel like a little vibrant hub in our valley. So 2 years ago, with Hugh in his 70s and me nearly 70, we decided to retire from commercial growing. At the same time, however, we resolved to keep Longmeadow in good heart, planting more trees and hedges, and keeping open hearts and minds as to who or what might come to our gate. Today, the farm shop has become a lively and thriving plant-based cafe and shop run by a sister and brother team. Our daughter with her partner and her little girl live here in a cottage designed by Justin, her brother. They've created a 6-yurt campsite, which is in its 9th year now, and Heather is establishing a cut flower business. It is heartwarming watching these land-based enterprises grow and flourish on the land we took care of all those years. It is also gratifying to know that most of our proteges from over the years have found their own holdings in France, Cornwall, Devon. They're starting to get gray hair too. Well, we started our business pre the internet. We talked to all of our customers in person or on the phone. We sent out newsletters with stamps on them. They visited Longmeadow and we became friends. Of course, the World Wide Web is a wondrous thing, but I am grateful that it was not an essential tool when we started up. Today, I'm indulging my love of textiles and making gardening and loving gardening just for the love of it and appreciating nature more now that rabbits, frosts, droughts, and pigeons are no longer a threat. And I'm happy in my skin as a slightly wiser and definitely older woman. And there you go. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Patsy. Yeah, we'll just move straight on to Ruth, if that's okay.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Patsy. That was so lovely to hear that wonderful journey, which, you know, you may sound very tranquil and ordered, and, you know, I'm sure there was lots of bits where you were thinking, what on earth am I doing? Or maybe not. Anyway, hello, everybody. Again, really nice to see everyone, well, not see you, but to know that you're here. And to have the chance to meet with you and to talk about my farming journey, which some of the things that Patsy said really resonated, particularly the mobile home phase, which I'm still in, but also the chickweed wig. But it's not only the children that have been known to wear the chickweed wig. If you're a serious horticulturalist of the organic persuasion, you'll know that you can get your chickweed wigs to grow, you know, this big, and you pull them out of the ground. They're just irresistible. How can you not put that on your head? Anyway, so it's, I don't know, I'm not sure that Patsy's the next generation to me. I think we might be sort of hovering in a similar, who knows, where does one generation finish and another end? But for the record, if anybody needs to write it down, I'm 53 years old. So Patsy could technically be my mum, I suppose. Yeah, so I don't come from a farming background myself. Well, my grandparents were market gardeners in Yorkshire, and because of the nature of my parents' work, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. So I think that formative experience was great for me. And they do say that it often skips a generation, that the children don't necessarily, because they've grown up seeing the reality of the hard work and some of the you know, some of the downsides of it, whereas the grandchildren perhaps see all the fluffy nice things, and by the time they've grown up, it's come back round again. Who knows? But yes, so I grew up in the city of Bristol in the UK. I had a fairly sort of standard suburban upbringing, but it was the 1970s when I was a child, and I think I started farming at about the age of sort of 5 or 6. I'm making little wicket fences for ladybirds around the garden. Of course, the ladybirds didn't stay in, but you know, the principle was there, looking at all the roots of the grass and just seeing all this amazing life going on around. And Bristol, for those of you who know it, it's quite a green city, so you know, you can wander even at quite a young age and go into little patches of woodland that feel like vast patches of woodland when you're only sort of 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I think that just sort of bit me, and although I was on an academic path, maybe through school, and it was at I ended up taking all science A levels, because this was at a time in the 1980s when, you know, we were sort of encouraged to do practical things and wealth creation and things, and it's like you get told that this is, you know, this is the way to go. And then I realized I was on this path through my A levels where I was going to end up in a laboratory, but all my enjoyment was outside. So it's like, why am I? It didn't connect. So long story short, I left school at just 17. I didn't even finish my A levels. Don't do that, kids. Finish your A levels, and ran away to Devon. And I was only coming here for a year before I was due to go to college in Hampshire to study fish farming. I was here to do a year's work experience in fish farming. And then I kind of got a bit stuck in the valley that I still live in. I decided to not continue with the fish farming and went into livestock farming. Partly by chance, a friend needed a hand on his farm with his lambing, and so I went to do that and realized that was more the kind of thing I wanted to do. It's quite nice now that his daughter, who wasn't even born at the time, now works for me on my farm, and it's all, and she brings her daughter with her, so it's all very wholesome and circular. So after that, then I went to agricultural college for 3 years. I did a national diploma in agriculture, which is sort of like the standard conventional agricultural course. But even by then, I'd come across the principles of organics. I knew a few organic growers. I'd done some work experience on the organic farm up in Somerset that was owned by Mark and Margaret Purdy. So some of you might remember that they were very vocal in the campaign against organophosphate warble fly dressings, to, so basically a nerve agent that it was mandated to pour along the spine of your cattle, even if you're an organic cattle farmer. And of course, Mark and Margaret were very kind of resistant to this, and they, very, very bravely said, we're not going to do this. And this was at a time when the Minister of Agriculture could come along and close your farm down if you didn't comply with what were at the time the regulations. And they went through all kinds of, terrible things, which I won't sort of detail, but basically, so I was influenced, I suppose, by these people who were really, pioneers of their time. Now it's, although we are still in an industrial agricultural situation, it's not too difficult to get the general public to go, oh yes, putting lots of toxins into things, that's probably not good. Whereas back then it was like, well, what are you crazy hippies going on about? Of course we should use all these things. It's the way forwards, it's the future. So I was influenced by a lot of people like that who were, now it feels like we're almost not quite the mainstream, but we're accepted. We're not nearly as fringe and weird and crazy as, even I felt 30 years ago at agricultural college, which was mostly boys. There was two women in a class full of 30 farmers' sons, and we weren't sort of, I don't think there was a vast amount of prejudice against us, so long as we could do, whatever they could do. I had a few remarks like, when I was going into outdoor pig farming, oh, that's not really the sort of thing that women usually go into. They're usually looking after the dairy calves. It's sort of more home-based. That's the expectation that you would going to be a farmer's wife, really. But that wasn't for me. So after I'd left college, I had my first son. So I did a bit of milky baby farming for quite a few years, and then decided to move into horticulture rather than larger livestock farming, because it was quite apparent that in order to get into farming from a non-farming background, the chance of buying a big farm was just not possible. If you've been working in farming or land-based work, you're unlikely to earn enough money to actually buy a whole farm. So the route in was like, for many of us, is you buy a small patch of land which you can get a fairly reasonable income from, and then you apply for permission to live there once you've established that you can run a business and do it. In 1998, my second son was born. And then once he was in school in 2003, I set up a small vegetable box scheme on a piece of rented land in the Otter Valley. And that established quite well. It has to be said that having a child at school so you can do farm gate sales is quite useful. But this was, I borrowed a piece of a rented farm in exchange for looking after 4 guys who had learning disabilities, who also worked on the farm in the winter, but there wasn't so much for them to do in the summertime, so they'd come and help me. So it felt like a really nice arrangement, where the sort of care farming situation, but it wasn't formalized, but it felt like a really nice, nurturing. I was growing food for the farmhouse. The guys were coming to help me. but I was also helped by the farmers who were renting the farm to sort of establish the business. So it felt like a really nice way to get started. And then in 2006, my partner and I managed to buy 12 acres in the Otter Valley and transferred the business across from the rented land to the land that we now own. And yes, we're still living in a mobile home. We went through the usual sort of planning hoops to get to where we are now, and at the stage of designing and applying for permission to build a house on site, which is very exciting, but a little bit scary too. So at the moment I'm running a medium scale, I suppose you'd call it, vegetable box scheme with a flock of 60 chickens well, 2 flocks of chickens totaling 60 that I move around the farm. They're in mobile houses and they clear ground and use up old crops, and they lay eggs which we can sell in the veg boxes. And currently I've got 2 women trainees on the farm. For the last 4 years I've had a woman trainee come and work alongside me for the whole season, and that's carried on through the pandemic. I mean, it's felt like our business has been, you know, sort of really pandemic proof. I keep forgetting that this thing is going on when I'm on the farm, because, you know, the sales have continued, the work continues. So that's felt really, really good, sort of resilient business structure, really supported, you know, literally. It's not a community supported agriculture in a formal sense, but it very much is. People helped us with a planning application, people, you know, it just feels like we're really embedded in the community. I'm also on the coordinating group committee for the Land Workers Alliance. So I've been doing that for the last 6 or 7 years now, I think, just going around and doing some gentle advocating for agroecology and getting involved in research. And I think I'm quite useful sometimes to sort of go up to Westminster and talk to the suits and present a, what shall we say, an acceptable face. In a way, it's useful because I've done it, because I started from nothing. I literally started with £300 and the tools in the garden shed, and now I have a business that makes me a living, that pays other people's wages, that facilitates our living on the land, that supports other people's learning. Yeah, I mean, it can be done. One of the reasons I became involved in the Land Workers Alliance is that, yes, I've done it, and I've been very lucky in many ways. I've had advantage, but also just useful things have happened to me along the way. I don't think it should be so difficult to get from where I started to where I am now. You know, there's been times when I've really wanted to just run away from it all, because it's felt so sort of overwhelming in many, many ways. And I mean, obviously that's sort of personal stuff too, but I think the way we work, or potentially can work as women, and I would say in a permaculture type of style, but without too many of the things that sometimes you say permaculture, and there's all kinds of things that come into your head if you've been in this movement for a while, but it's not about that. I think so many of the ideas that we take of using efficient systems, using our energy efficiently, using people, well, I say using, but, you know, making things work together, seeing that sort of synergy and holistic ideas, and how we work together, how we see our resources and we use them wisely. It's just it's a way of working that we have that it doesn't have to be a formal structure with, you know, sort of like tick boxes and what have you. It sort of feels like just what we do. I work with a team of 4 or 5 women nearly every day, and it just sort of feels like it flows. It doesn't have to, you know, it is massively complicated. Of course, nature is complicated. We're complicated. The systems are complicated, but we don't, maybe it's because we don't have these sort of rigid ideas so much. This is work, and this is my leisure time, and this is money, and this is, you know, it's all, sometimes it can get too much. Sometimes it can be too enmeshed and you feel like you need some space from it. But I think the way that we can work together is really, it's quite amazing. It's almost like we can take it for granted, but when you see it not happening, you know, when you see those industrialized, we're just going to go for efficiency, we're just going to go for money, and you think, how can you carry on like that? It just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me. So the way I feel that we work as women is really something quite special. It's hard to, as you can see, it's very hard to articulate, but there is something about the way we work together. So that's something else I haven't mentioned. For 3 years previous to the pandemic, we had a women's farm working weekend every year at the farm. So it was just a group of women who mostly work on farms or involved in the food system. And when I first came up with this idea, I thought to myself, oh, don't be ridiculous, Ruth. You know, people don't, you know, women don't want to do this kind of single sex thing anymore. You know, that's just like so 1970s. Be quiet about it. As soon as I mentioned it, and it was to young women, they were all saying, yes, 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 we really want to do this, because there's that thing where, oh, I don't know, we just won't so easily say things. We're kind of like, oh, I'm thinking this thing, maybe it's not quite right, you know, all that second guessing, should I say this? This is going to make me look foolish, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, some guy, sorry, guys, fantastic, has just said the thing, and we've gone, hang on a minute, that's what I was going to say, but I had all this background noise going on and I couldn't possibly say it because I didn't want to feel foolish, or I didn't want to feel like I have to represent the whole of womanhood and I should know this thing, and drama, you know, but it's all back there, isn't it? Background noise. It's like having 17 tabs open at once, whereas, you know, not all, terrible generalization, but the guy will just go, oh, I thought this. You know, let's just speak and say the things and not worry, what will they think? You know, I have to be the perfect example of, you know, successful woman in agricultural business. I mean, some of us just happen to be, but we don't have to be amazing. Just okay is fine, and some days just not brilliant is also okay. But mostly, you know, we're doing fine, really. And, you know, I see the younger generation coming up and they're doing brilliantly. It's so fantastic to see so many younger women coming into farming and land working and not having all this background anxiety so much. I hope we can, the more of us, the more you see it, the more you can be it. It's just like, it becomes normal. We can do this easily. Not easily, but we can do this stuff. So the more people like Patsy and Petra and all of you who are all doing these things already, it's like, just show that you're doing it quietly or loudly or however you want to do it, but just, you know, say, look, I'm doing these things. Yeah, so I've probably left loads of things out, but you know, you could go on forever, couldn't you, about your stories and what have you. But yeah, more and more and more women in farming. It so makes sense. So makes sense. Okay, so I hope that I didn't go on too long. I know you're all really nice. You'll say no, you didn't.
No, that was really amazing. Thank you so much, Ruth. And it's just a really nice, yeah, it's really interesting to kind of look at both of your both Patsy and yours, Ruth, stories and where you kind of came from, and I guess the different upbringings and looking at how they compare and leading you to a very kind of similar life. And yeah, so I'll hand over to our final speaker, Petra. Yeah, take it away.
Sorry, I almost forgot to unmute. I did say I'd be terrible at the technology. Yes, hi, I'm Petra. I'm quite a new grower. I've only been doing this for a year, and I'd say 4 months of that was actually volunteering. So maybe only 8 months growing vegetables in a professional sense. I currently work on a 5-acre plot just on the outskirts of Bristol. We grow vegetables in polytunnels and outdoors, and there's an apiary and an orchard. I mainly am involved in the veg growing side of things, and we do a mixture of kind of just hand scale things, human scale, hand scale. I'll call it human scale farming, and then we do have a tractor as well. So there's a mechanized aspect of it. I just a bit of background. I grew up in London. I kind of had a very urban experience and didn't really think about growing stuff at all. I think I remember once saying I wanted to live on a farm when I was older, but I think I just really liked animals and wanted to hang out with them kind of outside of the city. I have always enjoyed being outdoors, but I think my experience of growing up in London and doing physical things was very shaped by that very teenage tunnel vision of how you want your body to be presented and not wanting to be physical in any way to draw any attention to yourself. And I don't know if that's just an urban experience or a teen experience, but I felt very sure that I didn't want to engage in things, even though I really like doing outdoor stuff. I didn't want to have anything that would, I don't know, make you feel strong, because all the bodies shown at that time were very thin, and that was what was into it. Anyway, that is a tangent, kind of, maybe not. But I always loved food and how it can be used as an incredible tool for nurturing people and just creating conversation and community and stuff. But I moved out of London and moved to Brighton and kind of started dabbling a bit more in being in the countryside and joining the allotment society and really thinking about woofing and getting more involved in where food had come from, because always being at the consumption end of it, which just interested me to get more into the production side of it. And so I went woofing. It ended up being quite an interesting woofing experience. Very little farming, lots of deep massage and stuff. So it was, but it did the bits of harvesting that I did do, I really enjoyed, and it just started snowballing the thought of how nice it is to be outside and using your body. And then I kind of was finishing uni and knowing I wanted to move into something a bit more involved in regenerative practices, and kind of drawing on experiences that I had growing up and not really putting them together, but being I was a butcher for 5 years when I was a teenager, from the age of 14 to 19, which I know lots of people are very anti the meat trade, but it was really opened my eyes to the work and the passion that organic farmers had, because the guy would drive in from Suffolk and kind of sell his meat there, but surrounded in this farmers market by lots of male farmers. And so there were no, I guess I didn't see many examples of female farmers, especially growing up in an urban sense and not knowing any of the urban things going on at the time. And I guess the idea of being, the image of a farmer that you grow up with is a man on a tractor in a field with no one else around you. And that concept of going into a very isolated field where you don't see yourself represented is kind of daunting. But I left London, went to uni, finished uni, and met someone who'd done a course in Bristol called Shift Bristol, which when I heard about it, it just sounded amazing. It was kind of like a practical sustainability course where you do some permaculture and horticultural modules and build a roundhouse and stuff. And I was suddenly lumped in a city amongst a group of people who were really involved in growing, and not only growing, but just building things with their hands and just felt really confident with it. And it was really great to see, and went to a lot of farms with women who were kind of leading them, or talking to us about soil health, or going and showing us all of these schemes that they'd set up in the city and in rural areas. And it was really, I guess, formative, and really feeling like it was something that I could maybe get involved in. Yeah. I guess last year during the pandemic, really, I just moved back to Bristol 3 weeks before the first lockdown had happened, after having gone gallivanting a little bit, and really knew that I didn't want to be sat indoors or get a job which involved being at home a lot, and was fortunate enough to be able to support myself while volunteering at a farm. So I went to this farm, and it's great. I'm the only woman there. There's 3 other guys, and we just laugh a lot. We're outside all the time, and I think probably I have the light farming experience as not someone who actually owns the plot, and I only work 3 days a week. So it's a very different experience than people who've been doing it for years, and probably 24/7, 8 days a week. But something that I've found interesting while working there is, because we have this part of the farm which is mechanised using tractors, and then the other side of it which is very much more human scale. There is a gender split which has kind of developed. I guess it wasn't there before I arrived because there were no other women. So a gender split has emerged of who does which jobs. And I think it's something that it'd be an interesting thing to tackle, because I have driven the tractor and I have used a big saw and I have drilled things and helped build things. But it does go generally to the guys there. And I think it's a difficult one, because when you're in a growing season and there's not much time, and you've got a couple of people who in their previous jobs were carpenters, and previous jobs were like motorcycle racer, so knows things about engines, so when the tractor falls apart they know how to fix it. It would be a bad use of time, I think, to put me in that when I'd have to study how to fix a tractor for months, I think, before I even knew what to do. But it's the strange thing of feeling like occasionally like you are less than because you're not confident in that realm. But I've also found that growing food, and I remember standing there and planting seeds and thinking, wow, think of all those people around the world who are just growing food for people. That's an incredible thing to be doing. And I was like, oh shit, I'm doing that as well. And it suddenly was this majorly empowering realization, and just feeling really confident in my body's ability to go and shovel manure and pour it onto a field and dig things out and be out in the rain and the cold. And I've seen all seasons now, and it's just felt really good to value that equally, because I think sometimes feeling there should be really equal opportunities to learn the skills, and I don't know how you do that in a very busy working farm environment where it makes sense to do things efficiently and have people who know what they're doing. Of course, you could have new entrant men and women who both don't know what they're doing in those things. I'm not assuming all guys know how to fix tractors and all women don't. But I really think it's also important, as well as making those opportunities equal, to really uphold the other side of it, and that all jobs are necessary. I think, feeling, it was really nice hearing how rewarding both of the other speakers have found it. And I think that just growing food for people has been just such an amazing thing to be doing, and feeling capable in yourself to do that has been really good. I also, being at the farm, I've kind of taken on the role of being a volunteer coordinator when we've had other people come, and it's been, apart from one person, maybe two people, we've mainly had female volunteers, and it's really nice to see that interest from other women coming out and being on the farm. And there's lots of interest in people wanting to go out and start to grow things themselves, which is really cool. And I think a lot of people are trying to get jobs through volunteering, and it is an amazing way of getting experience. But I also wonder if it's because they sometimes feel like they're not good enough unless they have all of this stuff racked up in the back, instead of just feeling confident that they will be able to go for a job and pick vegetables. It's questions I ask. But I also think volunteering is a really rewarding experience anyway. And I think I'm an obsessive volunteerer, and I volunteer constantly even when I've got a job. I think it's such a nice, amazing thing that can happen. But yeah, working on the farm has been a really affirming thing for myself, and it's really nice in this technological age to see people presenting themselves online and reimagining what a farmer is. And I guess I have been really talking about it in the UK context, but being exposed to seeing what's happening around the world through the work of people like the groups of Livia Capsina, and just at the Oxford Real Farming Conference this year, having such a global context because it was able to have people from all around the world. It's been really amazing. Yeah, I feel like I should have a summarising point, and I don't, but it's been, yeah, it's really nice to be part of this event. So thank you. Sorry if that was short.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Petra. Yeah, and I feel really honoured, and I'm sure a lot of us do here, to be to be part of this and hear some really amazing insights into the lives of some amazing women in a still relatively male dominated space. So thank you, everyone. We do have some questions. Keep them coming in. I'll just read out the first few. So the first one is for Patsy from Emma. She says, that was lovely to listen to. What impact did raising your children on the farm have? You mentioned that your daughter is setting up a land-based enterprise. Was this influenced by her upbringing?
I'm sure it was. And she's very much her mother's daughter, with a similar work ethic. And having lived in London for 10 years and worked in the sort of artistic textile world, she always said when she found the father of her child, she would move to the country. And she moved here and hasn't stopped since she arrived. With her fingernails are worked down to the quick, and she has a wonderful work ethic. So I'm sure she was dyed in the wool to do this. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So another question from Emma for Ruth this time. How do you think farming / land work could be made more accessible? And she says it's good to hear that you are training young women.
Hi, Emma and everybody. Yes, well, I mean, the first thing, the prerequisite for doing land work is, of course, stating the obvious, is land, isn't it? And we you know, despite all the advances we've made, we are still, you know, it has to be said, we're still living in a patriarchal system of land ownership and land management. As Petra was saying, who do you, when you hear farmer, you expect, you know, you imagine a guy in a boiler suit driving a tractor. I mean, I have to say, I do rather like you know, I shouldn't, because obviously I'm burning fossil fuels, but I do rather like my machinery. Those of you who know me know that, you know, I try to limit it, but I will jump on the tractor and go around doing very, very important things, of course, doing that. And I think I keep meaning to bring this up at various meetings and, you know, what can we do to progress, is we really need some more women to go into farming technology, whether, I mean, of course, we'd like to get away from diesel tractors and all, and, you know, move on to just using contemporary sunlight. And I hear in India, they're already using solar powered tractors. So they're obviously kind of, you know, practical, they're, you know, they're on the market. But I'm so lucky that I've got a very good tractor mechanic just down the road from me. He's in his late 70s. He should have retired years and years ago, and he's just amazing in that he's barely ever left the valley, but he will help me out with my machinery, my implements, and he's so non-patronizing. You know, he can see that I'm doing what I'm doing. He'll explain how something's working or not working, and really, if somebody could apprentice themselves, a woman could apprentice themselves to someone like that, it would be fantastic, because you've got much bigger scale, you know, fixing all kinds of computerized stuff. And that's, I don't see that that's really the future in terms of, if we're going to do agroecology, if we're going to do not necessarily, you know, smaller scaled, but smaller units. We can't carry on doing this biggering and biggering. I beat myself up about the amount of diesel that I use. I discovered not that long ago that in a year, my yearly diesel delivery for my whole farm working is only something like 20 litres more than the fuel tank in one of those massive, great, big, you know, the big tractors you see herring around the lanes doing all the work that they're, you know, stuck in a system where they have to do this work in order to pay the borrowing on the tractor. You know, on and on it goes. But their tanks for like 2 or 3 days work is the same as the diesel I use for a whole year. So I think proportionately, you know, we need to go, if everyone kind of came back to what way I was doing things, then it wouldn't be perfect, but we'd be going in the right direction, because it's so easy for us to beat ourselves up about the fact that, oh no, I'm using a little bit of plastic here, or I'm using this here. Whereas in the whole scale of things, you know, the way that we're working, it's a transition, isn't it? It's a transition from what we don't want to be doing, which is happening, to something, you know, more human scale, as Petra was saying. So the barriers, I think, are access to land, but also as women, the confidence that we can do it and that our methodology is good. It's not that we have to prove ourselves, you know, endlessly, that we're as big and tough and extractive and macho as they are. Of course, you know, physicality, you have to be able to push a hoe. But yeah, just to, we need to get some land. We need our names on that land. And we need the confidence to farm it, to not think, oh, I have to prove that I'm good enough to do this. It's just, you can do this. You know, there's no reason. I think a lot of the barriers are also in our heads. Not all of them, of course. It's not just we have to change the way we think, but that is part of it. Is just to see ourselves as farmers and food producers and land managers, and that it's not, you know, it's not something that's close to us. So it's an attitude of mind, but we also do need that land. You know, there's no substitute for it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Yes, maybe we could open the question up to, yeah, I mean, I don't know if Patsy or Petra have any additions to that, but also just from the chat, it seems like there's some really amazing people here who are, yeah, kind of experienced in growing and farming. So yeah, it's very much a kind of discussion as much as a kind of question and answer session. So yeah, feel free to put your hand up if you want to reply to that one. Patsy and Petra, I don't know if you have anything to add, first of all.
This concern about matching up all this wonderful inspiration and energy with land has been with us from the beginning, because we were in the position of wanting to have our own opportunity to start growing. And first we share farmed in Somerset, which was one way of entering into the scene. It gave us a chance to learn some skills, and it was a good exchange with the farmer. And then we had a break. We were able to translate some land we were given in America to some land in England. So that was that. But it has been a concern all along, particularly as we've had wonderful, able people work for us over the years, and really wanted them to have their break. And most of them have. They've been in the situation that Ruth is in now, of living in caravans and battling to get planning permission to build a humble cottage to begin with. But I think where there's a will, the match can happen out there. And of course, we've got lovely organizations like the ELC helping it along too. So yeah, I'm encouraged. Yeah.
I'm not, yeah, I think because I've just started entering this world, and I'm trying to think about how I managed to start growing. And it was really through being able to volunteer. And I think that isn't an accessible option for a lot of people, because in the world you have to fund yourself. And I'm fortunate that I'm living at a friend's house, and so my bills are very low, and I was able to, while looking for a job simultaneously, survive on universal credit. So I think probably the importance of agriculture and the people feeding us needs to be elevated within the UK, and probably a huge seismic shift in the government funding people's placements, so it's not the small farmers that have to, because small farmers are really helping people by allowing them to volunteer and doing training growing seasons. But it would be really nice if, one, just the value of food went up anyway, and so people were paid a good wage, but if the government really supported the shift for people growing. And I think making it more accessible is also really encouraging people in cities to slight re-ruralisation, I think would be a good thing. Also, hopefully diversifying the countryside a bit, and creating those networks, because cities need a lot of food to feed them. And so it's I think it's really important for that accessibility, to have a really good conversation between the urban and the rural environment as well. I've just seen that someone said the paid internships, such as the Kickstart scheme, and I think I've seen a lot of farms actually using that as a opportunity to hire new people, and we were applying for it on the farm that we're working on. And we got rejected. So if anyone's done it and they've got accepted, could you please give us some pointers, because I think it would be really amazing. It's great to think about having more hands helping in the growing season, but it also has been something that we want to do because it feels really important to be able to share that knowledge and allow other people to come on to it if when they maybe didn't feel that they could, because there aren't many roles out, especially in urban and peri-urban farming. It's quite hard to get a job because I think it's quite popular in circles that know about it. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. There's a comment in the chat from Alison Rickett saying land matching and joint ventures can really improve the access to land and opportunities. I don't know if you want to kind of delve a little bit deeper into that, Alison. Feel free to take the mic.
Thanks very much indeed. It's purely because of a lot of the work that we've done over the last few years. I come from a farming background, tenant farming background, but there wasn't the opportunities to necessarily follow that through. You still had to find your own way as well. And varying things that happened to me in my life, and I do feel probably being a woman might have had some impact on that. What was being offered was then latterly taken away. And so a real passion of mine became that we actually try to create something, an environment, a system where we can put people together that want access to land, have the passion and everything else to do that, but how can they get hold of it? And we know it's a finite resource, it's the monies that are involved and everything else. So we did set up the land matching service for England, and as a pilot, and that was bringing people together, landowners, business owners from all sorts of places, and introducing them to people from small, from organic growing sections, from growing sections. I've also worked with Helen as well, going through to other farming systems, and we bring those landowners and those people that wanted to farm in whatever system it might be together and introducing them. It's a bit like a dating service for land, is the best way I can put it, really. We thought there would be an absolute outcry for people wanting this and not enough land. That was the presumption we went into it. The reality was that we had more landowners coming forward interested in offering this than we had initial people interested in taking those opportunities. So it totally spun it on its head of what we thought was happening. So the reality is that there are people out there very willing to look at other ways of working. And the biggest thing we can do is get those communications going within our local areas with local farmers. And we couldn't ever get the pilot moving beyond to a national system. We're still in talks to try and get that achieved, but it is there. And the other way is through joint ventures. So again, it's working with people in your locality or areas you might want to, like share farming, like Patsy said. There's a whole range of different agreements that you can work alongside people and have your own business and have that access to land. And there's some brilliant mentors out there that can help you build your businesses up as well.
Thank you so much, Alison. That's really interesting. I wonder if you could put your kind of project in the chat that you mentioned, so that people can look it up.
Yeah, by all means. Thanks.
Thank you. There's a few, we have a few questions to ask the speakers. There's one more in the chat, just a little request from Amy, who is doing her master's thesis project on potatoes, and I was just wondering if there are any women potato farmers in the north. Just in case anyone didn't see that one in the chat, but maybe you can reply to Amy. I guess a question for Petra. Do you think, kind of looking at what Patsy and Ruth have said, and their experience of being a woman and going, living a lot of their lives in farming and agriculture and growing, and kind of seemingly getting on with it despite all the kind of challenges that being a woman in that world faced, and then kind of looking forwards to the future and with the understanding that there's still not kind of gender equality in the world. Do you, I guess, as a new-ish grower and still relatively young, do you think that, yeah, do you feel kind of hopeful from what Patsy and Ruth have said? Do you feel kind of a mix of hope and kind of is it kind of really daunting to you what the future might hold for you and other women? Yeah.
I think probably the opposite of daunting. I think it sounds amazing that even when it sounded like there were much less or fewer women, and you were still doing it and still loving it, that I think that passion that can thrive even when you don't feel as represented is really inspiring. And I'm very hopeful and positive about the future of growing. I'm hopeful and positive about it in terms of more women being represented. I'm hopeful about seeing some of the work that people like Land in Our Names are doing in the UK and Soulflower Farm in the US, the big ones that people always talk about, are doing. It's really great for other marginalised groups. I'm hopeful that there'll be more regenerative practices. So yeah, I think I'm quite hopeful in general. I think also I've come at it really from a more alternative farming entrance. I haven't seen the big scale commercial growing side, and so maybe I'm very rose tinted glasses at the moment, and maybe I need to go to the Oxford Farming Conference as well as the Oxford Real Farming Conference just to see how the other side does it. But being surrounded by all of these conversations and hearing you guys talk about your experience and doing it for as long as you've been doing it is really affirming and amazing to hear. I hope to meet more great farmers and women farmers throughout this journey of growing. Yeah.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat from sorry, getting a bit confused between all the screens I'm looking at. From Rachel, how could males be more proactive in supporting women in farming? Question for all of you and anyone else who wants to answer.
Yeah, I don't mind starting with that one. I think a lot of them already are supportive, and of course, it will vary. We're talking from individual to individual. There is a slight culture, perhaps, of well, it's not males, is it? It's like you can't talk about all women any more than you can talk about all men. But I think it's a recognition and a little bit of. I think the biggest thing I've come up against, and I've raised 2 sons, so I'm very kind of aware of the possibility of a sort of the problems or the situations that men find themselves in, where they've got that thing where they have to know things, or they have to, they have to be able to fix things, they have to be able to sort things out. And and I've also taken that from the women's weekends, is that they don't feel that they have to have all the answers or the solutions, or that if we express a problem or an anxiety that we're having, we don't necessarily need them to leap in and fix it and say, oh, why don't you do this or do that? It's just kind of, oh, I witness you and I'm hearing what you're saying, but I don't need to charge in and fix this problem for you, because that's part of what takes away our empowerment and our confidence is like, oh, you know, however much we might try to say we're not in that space, we still have that background culture of the men come and rescue us from our distress. Even if you've been brought up as a, you know, proper good feminist, you're still in a society that says ultimately the men come and do the big macho stuff and rescue the situation. So yes, it's a sort of subtle thing that men can hear us, listen to us, witness, understand that there are some differences and some similarities, but just not to feel that because we've said we're having an issue that they have to, you know, they have to rescue us from that situation. Of course, they can do the equal amounts of childcare and equal amounts of domestic work and, you know, all those things too, but surely that's a given. We don't need to say that to them, do we? Do we? But it is, I mean, it is an issue of there's an expectation on us as women of kind of like, if we've got children or if we've got elders that need care, we know that we should be sharing this work equally with our male partner if we have a male partner, but, you know, we get that expectation of kind of like, if they do it, then they're being incredibly helpful and what have you, and if we do it, well, that's just what you do, isn't it? So again, it's background noise, isn't it, of like, I don't need to step in and always be doing the child or the elder care. Other people can do this. So it's like recognizing those dynamics that we can have where we have expectations of ourselves or we project other people's expectations onto ourselves. It's like, no, it's okay, you can carry on doing your work. So if men recognize this, potentially our anxiety that we feel we should be leaping into the domestic sphere as soon as there's an issue, and men don't have to leap into the technological sphere as soon as there's an issue. You know, it has to be an active overriding of those cultural norms, and it takes a while. I mean, I'm still working it out every day with my partner, who's sort of fully on board with it. Well, he says he is dismantling the patriarchy, partly because it means he doesn't have to do so much work, maybe. No, that's unfair. But, you know, even if you're in a very conscious situation where everyone's trying to be equal, there's still, you know, recognizing those cultural tropes of farmer's wife and, you know, men in overalls and men do metal bashing and women bake scones, and not that, you know, everyone can do that stuff. So yeah, communication, recognizing dynamics of relationships, I think. And they can make more scones.
Patsy or Petra, feel free to answer that. There's also some more comments in the chat. We can go to other people if you don't want to speak now.
Yeah. How can men help encourage women? I guess for one, hiring women would be a good thing to make people feel like they're worth hiring. And once you're there, I think what you were saying really resonated, Ruth. I do think just having a confidence that women can do things and realizing maybe that their lack of confidence is hindering their ability to do things. And I really am speaking from personal experience, just because I know lots of women are super confident in driving tractors, but I can't even drive a car. So I feel like I'm coming at it from a real no experience point of view. But I think probably really good, clear sharing of knowledge, and yeah, I don't think, maybe I'm rambling a bit actually. Ruth, what you said was great. I'm gonna stop answering that question.
So I have to confess that 35 years ago, when we were needing to hire some help on our holding, that we had to learn that petite young woman potentially was as strong and able as a chap, because where we came from, and this was myself and my husband, not just him, was that we were looking for muscles and ability to drive the tractor and lift sacks, and we had to learn that actually there were a lot of young women out there incredibly strong, however petite they might look. And it was an exciting thing to discover, and to discover that we'd been looking at it the wrong way. There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, about roles, our roles. We've always done the work that we were most capable of. And I have no interest in changing the oil in the tractor. Absolutely. I'm grateful to hand it over to Hugh. He, on the other hand, might not be that good at raising little seedlings, nurturing them to go out in the field. So we did what we loved doing the most, and spared each other having to do the less favorite tasks. And I never considered it degrading, or resented the fact that I wasn't encouraged to get out on the tractor or do those sort of jobs, or drive our vegetables around the countryside in a trailer, delivering pallet loads to Wales and wherever. So it might sound a little bit old-fashioned, I don't know, but that's that from somebody starting out in the early 80s, late 70s. This was how we found our creativity.
Thank you. Yeah, that's brilliant. There's a comment from Nat in the chat. I don't know if you want to expand a bit on what you were saying, Nat, about treating lack of knowledge as teaching opportunities instead of trying to fix the problem.
Yeah, sure. So I am a dairy farmer. I work on a micro dairy, but I did a few apprenticeships in America at the start of my farming journey. And before that, I was on a internship program where some of it was about building trails in national parks in America. And so I guess I had quite an empowering learning journey into what might be more of a male field here. It doesn't really feel like that in America for some reason. But here I feel like there's a much more of a disparity between what women are expected to do and what men are expected to do. So I had a couple of really good male mentors in America who were instrumental in teaching me like practical, tractor skills and building skills, and just really good at explaining their knowledge and experience, just as if I was another person, not a woman learning something, and coming back to the UK, yeah, I definitely noticed a difference in what people thought I might be capable of, first of all, and then secondly, like that thing about treating learning opportunities as a teaching opportunity. Also, like from the my recent experiences seems to be missing a bit. And I'm not sure if that's a time related thing. Like if we're under a lot of pressure as farmers to do things efficiently, then taking the time to teach someone when something goes wrong, or show someone else how to do something when you can get it done a lot faster yourself, is not very efficient, but it is very empowering for that person. And so for me, I've made a couple of mistakes recently on tractors, which resulted in some costly repairs. But like not being able to see how those repairs were done, it took away some of my power in a sense. So I think just like giving women, that opportunity to really be involved in all parts of what they're doing, if they would like to be, is definitely an empowering thing to do as a male mentor. Yeah.
Thank you, Nat. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting way of looking at how we kind of teach things, and first is like getting on and doing stuff. And yeah, it's interesting as well, I think, look like kind of comparing it to probably how we used to do most things, which was in the long term it would be better to teach people rather than do it yourself because it's much more efficient. And it's interesting to look at maybe how we've kind of reversed that a little bit, and possibly what damages that has done to kind of the kind of quick fix short termness of most industries in this world. We've got 3 minutes left. I just want to come to a point in the chat from Vicky. Vicky, do you want to talk a little bit more? I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here about encouraging DEFRA to ensure promotion and design works for women in their new entrance scheme.
Oh, well, it just occurred to me when we were talking about access to land and whether it would be worth thinking about getting DEFRA to consider how it promotes it, so it makes sure it's promoting it in ways that really do attract and reaches women farmers, women would-be farmers and growers. It was just a thought listening to sort of some of the barriers discussion, and just put it out there, and we could talk about it as organizations. Sorry, I should say I'm Vicky Hurd. I work at Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming, so I'm not a farmer, although I'm very keen to do woofing this summer if I can. Just thought I'd say that.
That's brilliant. That's really good. Food for thought. And I think there's quite a few people in the chat who are quite keen. We'll leave it at that. There was one question I kind of wanted to ask the speakers and anyone else that was quite looking at the wider perspective, but maybe we can hold it in our minds and think about this. And it was just about how, given that we're all kind of the kind of wider environmental or climate movement is reaching out to be much more kind of intersectional and linking so many different issues and marginalized voices into this one big thing that saying the system is broken. I guess looking at the wider picture of the liberation of women and other marginalized groups, and looking at the climate crisis, how far do we think that the getting more women into these spaces, into these agricultural workspaces, can go to tackling the climate and ecological crisis, and at the same time the genuine liberation of women. Maybe that's something that we can wonder about. And I'm sure that the reasons that most of you came today was because we're very interested in trying to do that. So hopefully we'll go away and think about it, and if you find an answer, then let us know. That leaves me with just thanking hugely to that doesn't make sense, thanking massively our wonderful speakers for taking time out of their busy growing jobs, and for coming on and giving us a little insight into what it was like and what it is like for women growers and farmers. Also just to say that this is a kind of Kindling Farm Webinar Series. We are little plug, shameless plug. We are running a campaign, if you don't know, to attract community investors to buy a farm on the outskirts of Manchester. And yeah, you can still become an investor. And I think Helen can put the link in the chat maybe. But yeah, and if you want to sign up to our e-news as well, then I think there's a link in the chat. But yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, everyone. I don't know if any of the speakers have any last words. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you all, and see you all soon. Keep farming.